Let's go over week 2. And this week we're going to be covering data modeling and also DAX fundamentals. So this is our agenda. We're going to be covering calendar table, star schema, relationships in Power BI, calculated column versus measures, DAX basics, and also key functions, evaluation context, really good concept as well to master Power BI. And then I'm going to be covering also visual calculations at a high level. Finally, I'm going to be covering the hands-on exercise. Let's go over the first point here, a calendar table. If you are dealing with date calculations in Power BI, a calendar table is a must. You can see here the features for a calendar table. Features like a calendar table should contain all dates included in the period to analyze. It also should contain one column of date time type with unique values. Another concept really important here is to mark your calendar table as a date table. And this is important because if the relationship between the calendar table and the fact table is between an integer value, which has this format right here, that is when it's important to mark this calendar table as a date table. If you don't do that, you will get weird results. There are a couple of functions that you can use to create a calendar table. The calendar auto is really powerful as well. And you have two options here within this function. It can be just empty, or you can also add the last month of the fiscal year that you're working on. For this particular case, the fiscal year is June, and that is why it's going from July 1st through June 30th next year. That is the range of months that we're going to have by using this option right here. Another option is by using the calendar function. And for that option, you need to have start date and also end date. So I'm going to be covering in more detail. We have an example about calendar table, so please stay tuned. Star schema. This is also really powerful. As you can see this visual right here, the fact table is in the middle, and then we have dimension tables around it. So dimension tables, they describe entities such as products, people, places, and time. Fact tables, these tables store observations or events such as sales orders, stock balances, exchange rate, temperatures, or perhaps economic indicators like inflation and unemployment. The engine, the DAX engine, works really well. It's very efficient if your data model is based on a star schema. The fact table in the middle and then dimension tables around it. Relationships. Like I said, the fact table is usually in the middle and then dimension tables around it. For this particular case, we have 3 tables in total. Fact table is called economic indicators, that is in the middle. And then we have also 2 dimension tables, dates and continents. And you might remember this, we covered this in week 1, but there are 3 different types of relationships. One-to-many, one-to-one, and many-to-many. Highly recommended to use one-to-many, and this is what we have here. One for dates and then many for economic indicators. And then we have one for continents and then we have many for economic indicators. So the model is perfect. So now let's briefly talk about calculated columns and measures. If you can perform the same calculation by using calculated columns and measures and you're getting the same results, it's highly recommended to use measures, because measures, they are just aggregated values. Measures are evaluated in the context of a visual element, but the measure doesn't really belong to any specific table. We can move a measure from one table to another without losing its functionality. In other words, it's more flexible. You can also save space and memory. And actually, we're going to be using a lot of measures when we get into our hands-on exercise. Now let's go over DAX basics and key functions. DAX can be really powerful, but it can be also overwhelming. In order to learn DAX, you need to learn theory and also understand the evaluation context. You need to understand these concepts very, very well. Also, evaluation context and calculate are crucial topics to master DAX. And again, learning DAX takes time, patience, and practice. You can also see here the measure, the name of the measure, the function average. The name of the table is called economic indicators, and then the column name, which is GDP, gross domestic product. Let's quickly cover calculate. Calculate is the most important, useful, and complex function in DAX. Calculate and calculate table, they have a similar functionality. The only difference here is that calculate returns a scalar value, a unique value, only one value, whereas calculate table returns a table, like its name says, calculate table. And then you also have the syntax here. Calculate is the function, then the expression, the first parameter, and then we have conditions. They are also called filtered arguments, and they are tables. There are other key functions as well. I'm not going to go into the details here, but you can explore it. Every function here has a hyperlink. If you click on this, it's going to take you to that specific function in the Learn Microsoft platform. So you can explore it. There are examples there as well that you can go over. Now let's go over the evaluation context. Context is what enables you to perform dynamic analysis. And like it says right here, as a result of a formula change to reflect the current row or cell selection and any related data. Calculate and the evaluation context are important. Like it says right here, evaluation context plays a crucial role when using the calculate function. What is the context? The context is the environment within which formula is evaluated. And then you also have more concepts here. You can check it out at your own pace. Let's go over filter context real quick. What is filter context? A filter context is a set of filters in a Power BI report. And I have a screenshot right here. For this particular visual, I have 3 different filters. The first one is the country filter. I selected Peru. The second one is related to date. I selected year from 1960 to 2001. And then the other filter here is validate. Only give me validate result. In other words, I'm applying different filters to this report. And then if you want to see what's going on in 2001, by applying these filters, you can go over here and then you can see that we had 27 million people by applying these 3 filters. Peru, 2001, and also this filter right here, just for validates. And again, the same formula, the same measure can give you different results based on the filter context. You can move your filter here and then the result keeps changing dynamically as well. That is the importance of filter context. Row context is also part of the evaluation context. Every time you create a calculated column, you are creating a row context. It's used to iterate over tables and also evaluates column values. Another way to create a row context is by using the X functions, like SumX. So you see right here, we created this measure net cells, but then because we are using SumX, we are iterating over tables here, row by row. Context transition. So what happens if you are trying to create a calculated column? As you can see, it's giving you actually just one number, because when you create calculated columns, remember, we don't have filter context. We only have row context. The engine doesn't know how to behave because we are creating a calculated column, and a calculated column has only row context. If you want to change this row context or transition row context to filter context, you need to use calculate. Once you use calculate, around this calculation right here, you can see that you're getting the right results. So that is context transition. Really powerful when you're performing more complex calculations. Now let's go over visual calculations. Visual calculations is actually fairly new. You can perform now calculations on a visual and you have templates. And for example, in order to make this possible, you need to activate this preview feature. And once you activate this preview feature, you will have this option right here, this feature, new calculation. Select this option and then you start creating a visual calculation. And this is just an example. This is a moving average. You can get this moving average by applying this formula right here. There are other templates as well, like the running sum and also the percent of parent by using these functions right here. Now this is the time to go over the hands-on exercise.